In this video, I'd like to show you a couple different techniques for creating 3D views. Now, we've seen 3D views before, but we've only focused on this basic axonometric view that you get by default when using the default 3D view icon right here. Now, I want to actually show you in detail how this tool works. So let's start with that. The first thing I'd like to note is if you look at the project browser, under 3D views, you will see that the bold view is currently this curly bracket 3D curly bracket view. So that's a default built-in name that Revit uses to indicate the default 3D view, and I tend to refer to that as just curly bracket 3D. Now, that gets created automatically if it doesn't already exist. So let me show you what I mean by that. First thing is, I want to distinguish this view from the new one that we're about to create just a little bit. So there's any number of things that we could do to achieve that. We could change the orientation of the view or the shading. So let's change the shading. So I'm going to come down here to this bank of icons at the bottom of the window. And the third one over is a pop-up menu that has several different visual styles. And I'm going to choose this one here called Shaded. And of course, you'll see that the surfaces of this view are now shaded in this gray color and the windows have this transparent blue. So that maybe looks a little bit more interesting. Now I'm going to right-click curly bracket 3D and choose Rename. And you could call this anything you want, but I'm just simply going to name this Axon. Now, that means that we no longer have a curly bracket 3D view. So what I want you to do is to pay attention to the 3D Views branch right here as I come up to the toolbar and click the default 3D view icon again. And notice what happens. So if you don't already have a curly bracket 3D view, what will happen is when you click that button, Revit will say, oh, we don't have that view, so let's create one. And you'll just get a brand new curly bracket 3D. So that's just the way that that tool behaves. And once you understand that that's the behavior, then you can anticipate that with your usage of 3D views. So generally speaking, if you do anything to the default 3D view that you want to preserve, I recommend that you rename it, give it a descriptive name, and then the next time that you click the default 3D view, you'll just get a brand new one. So that's the easiest way to preserve axonometric views. Now, axonometrics are not the only kind of 3D view. We can also create camera views or perspective views. So that's what I have right here, 3D View 1. So if I double click that, you'll see that this is looking at the front of the building in a perspective view. So this is an example of a camera view that we can create. So let's do a couple things. First of all, let's rename this. And maybe this is the view from the street. So I'll just call this Street View. And then I'm going to go to the level 1 floor plan and let's create a new view. Let's say that the parking is actually behind the building back here at the upper portion of the plan. So maybe I want to stand there and look toward the building. So I can do that with a camera view. Now, don't click the default 3D view icon. What you do instead is you click the little drop down next to it, and you have the camera option right here. Now, creating a camera is 2 clicks. The first click represents where you want to stand. So let's say I want to stand over here next to the parking lot. And then the second click is the direction you want to look in. So I want to look toward the building, say in this direction. Now, I always recommend that you click past the subject matter, in this case, past the building. Otherwise, you might not see the entire building in this camera view. So I'm going to make sure that I'm making this little cone here deep enough to capture the entire building. And now you can see we're standing in that location and kind of looking towards it in perspective. Now, you can see that we're kind of closely cropped in on the building. Well, you've got these little control handles here, and you can use those to adjust what you're seeing in this view. You can also drag the wheel, you can roll the wheel, and make adjustments that way. So I can start to, stretch this out a little bit to kind of get a look at more of the building. Now, you want to be careful that you don't stretch these too far, because if you do, it starts to look a little distorted. So you see how it kind of looks a little fisheye up here at this edge. So usually what I'll do is I'll kind of try and find the sweet spot where I can make adjustments to that, where it's an acceptable view without becoming too distorted. Now, once again, I got 3D View 1, so I'll rename that Parking View. And let's go and create one more camera. We certainly are not limited to creating cameras on the exterior of the building. We can also do them from the interior, or really anywhere that you like. So I'll go back to the camera tool. And this time I want to stand kind of right over here by the host station. And then I want to drag toward the dining room. And I'm going to pick past that dining room wall there to make sure I'm getting the entire dining room. And then I'll click again. And now, of course, because we're inside the building, we're seeing into that space. Now here, we could make similar adjustments that we just talked about. So if you want to see a few more of these tables over here, as long as you are careful not to stretch this too far, you won't get much distortion over here. I can do the same thing running vertically and get a little bit more of the ceiling in that direction. Now, I've already said that you can roll the wheel and you can pan, and that kind of like zooms and pans the entire picture frame. But it turns out that you can also make adjustments within the picture frame itself. Now, the easiest way to do that is using this tool over here, which is called the full navigation wheel or the steering wheel. Now, when I click that, you're going to get this little wheel control, and it's got zoom and pan and orbit and lots of other tools in here. So we just did zoom and pan with the wheel. Well, this zoom and pan, the way this works is you highlight the one that you want, click and hold down the left mouse button, and then slowly start to drag. And notice that it's actually zooming now within the picture frame. Likewise with pan, click and hold down pan, slowly start to drag. And you can begin making adjustments to this view. Now, one that I kind of find interesting is this up and down option. So this is almost like jumping on an elevator and moving up into the space or down. So I'm going to hold that down and let's go up and make this more of a bird's eye view. So the more I drag this, the more I can kind of go up into the space. And then you've got this option here called look, and I could start to use that to turn my head in any direction. So now that we're way up here by the ceiling, I could sort of look down into the dining room like so. Now, sometimes you are using these tools and you get lost, right? Like let's say that I did the up and down and I went too far and now I'm like up here in the attic space. Well, instead of panicking and starting all over again, there's actually my favorite tool right here, Rewind. When you click that, you get this little film strip kind of thing, and you can start dragging through this film strip and it will remember every zoom and pan modification that you've made, and you can go backwards and forwards through this until you are at a point where you were happy with the view, and then you let go. So it really makes it easy for you to kind of recover from any of those accidental modifications. Now, there's lots of other tools in here, including a whole menu full of options here that I encourage you to explore on your own. But I'm going to go ahead and close the steering wheel for now. And just like we turned on shading in the axonometric view, you can turn it on here in the perspective view as well. And that'll make this maybe a little bit more interesting than just that hidden line view. Now, one last thing that I want to point out about perspective views is they come in cropped initially, but it's actually possible for you to come over here to the properties palette, scroll down, and using this checkbox right here under extents, you can uncrop the view. Now, when I do that, it actually removes the crop boundary, and now it's as if I'm in the space. Okay, I'm completely immersed in here. And if I go back to my steering wheel and kind of do the look this time, you see how I'm now able to kind of look around fully. In fact, I could spin all the way around the space if I wanted to and kind of really start to study it and see how things are shaping up. So that's another option that you have available to you. And of course, at any time, you could turn the cropping of the view back on again to remove that immersive effect. So I encourage you to explore further with both axonometric and perspective views. And there's nothing like a 3D view to really start giving you a sense of how your model is shaping up.